Okay, we will officially call the meeting to order of the Historic Review Commission at 1:10 p.m., October 2nd. Beginning with the meeting roll call. Craig Pepper.
Here.
Dave Brennan.
Here.
Mark Tannenbaum is not here yet. Melinda Meyer here. Jeff Zalonis.
Here.
Jason Wazorek.
I'm here.
Jason.
I'm here.
Okay, there we go. We can at least see that you're online. And Chris Kinder. Okay, really good. So we have, first on our agenda here, we have the approval of the September minutes. We are still waiting on the note taker for both the August and September meetings to prepare the minutes, so we are unable to vote on the September meeting or the approval of the September meeting minutes at this point. At some point, we may want to resolve that because I think it is important that we stay up to date with the submission of our meeting minutes and approval of those meeting minutes because they do get documented on the city's website. So yeah, I think we need to, and if we need to make changes to the process and or find another solution for note-taking, I think we need to do that. Okay. Moving then to number 3 on the agenda, we have an update for the Historic Preservation Plan.
Sure. So we had our meeting with the steering committee and HRC last week with Lakota Group on Tuesday, followed by a public workshop to kind of talk about the current state of the plan, and what they have now is kind of the state of the city on historic preservation, which was released a few months ago. This current update is recommendations for the preservation plan, and these rounds of meetings were for feedback. We didn't have either from the steering committee or from the public workshop, we didn't really have a lot in attendance from those groups. So with that, we talked with the consultants, and they offered to do an online workshop, which I think will be better attended. We'll do a little bit better job in terms of marketing that. We did the same marketing strategies we did when we had successful meetings. I think the time of the evening wasn't all that well for us. I think later in the evening would have been better. But either way, we had a good discussion. The plan is rolling along, and it's kind of in the home stretch right now. Rounding third, headed for home. So it's looking really well. The document itself is really well. I don't think anybody who reviewed it had any major comments or changes that needed to be made. So I think we're on a good place there.
So with the virtual workshops, so there have been people who have signed up with the virtual workshops, and then the potential for an additional survey coming up for public engagement. I'm wondering if either the Lakota Group or the city is responsible for utilizing the sign-up list to do email notifications, because through the eriepreservationplan.com website that the Lakota Group set up, there, as soon as you land on the site, there is an opportunity to sign up for notifications regarding the plan. And just in talking about the discussion now of the virtual workshop and the potential survey, kind of triggered for me, I signed up on the website for notifications, but I don't think I received notifications of this most recent public meeting through that virtual sign-up sheet. So I guess, and that's just a question, again, whether or not the Lakota Group is sending out notifications, or if they are leaving it to the city to use that email sign-up sheet again, virtual email
And we
sign-up
haven't
sheet to send
had
out
access to
notifications.
that. Yeah, we haven't had access to that list, so I will follow up with them and either receive the list or ask them about partnering to market those through those lists or how it
Yeah.
works. And we can do both.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that. And so the virtual workshops, are we thinking that those would be November or in October?
Hopefully late this month or early November would be my guess. They usually get marketing 2 to 3 weeks out. This time we got it 2 weeks out. So we will get it out. As soon as we get the market info, we'll start marketing or promoting it.
Okay. Questions or concerns from commissioners regarding the historic preservation plan, the process, the progress? Okay. I'll just quickly say I did appreciate the one-on-one discussion with the consultants via the review session that the commissioners had, as well as the steering committee for the plan. That was a great opportunity for us to talk in greater detail about where we're at. So that was good.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on then to new business. We did have a work session just to kind of discuss where we were at with the historic building improvement grant program. And from that, some suggestions for potential edits and or improvements came out. So we'll jump quickly to the proposed the proposed revisions for the guidelines for the historic building improvement grant program. So Chris was able to provide to us a copy of the revised guidelines. In red are changes in language that are being suggested based on the output of the work session that we had. So now's the time for commissioners to kind of express opinions regarding the proposed edits.
Well, there should be a revision date on this then to say that it is current and that everybody's looking at the same set of guidelines, right? Because the other ones are out there floating around.
And we'll revise that when they're approved.
It just goes under guidelines, revision date. So I was not able to make the workshop or the last work session. So, and I see the discussion in here about vinyl windows, and I'm okay with it. I would like to clarify though when it says, but need to be of high quality. And how do we make the decision what is high quality? I actually went through a lot of the applications that we're going to look at today, which are mostly related to windows and what. So one of the things would be cost, right? You would assume the higher the cost, the better the window would be. And I see things in the application anywhere from $623 a window to up to like $1,055. So there's a range, but again, not sure how we determine high quality unless we go and have the manufacturers come in and give us a story and make our own decision about what is high quality.
I think to prove high quality, it's not like you're going to have a window that says, okay, this one's high quality, this one isn't. I think with each window, would come certain details that we would need to just know more about. And again, a high quality window would show, how the glass is being installed, how it's constructed, etc. So I think that the judgment, it's hard to define it just in words. Really need to look at how it's constructed to see to determine if it's a high quality window or not. But definitely, I think we need to maybe think about how to say that to define that further.
Yes. We've been seeing quotes from, I think, consistently 4 window vendors, right? And I don't want to get into naming names and all that stuff, but basically we're seeing the same 4. Now, if we were to do this over again, it probably would pay to have these people come in and do the presentation. When they came, I had 3 people come and look when I got my windows put in, right? And I had 3 people come in, and they come in with their samples, and they show you the window and all the construction to point out all the questions that you just mentioned. And now that we're so far into this, and we've got some to vote on today, now we make this decision other than saying that the higher cost window is the better window. But
Are we saying
Well,
that
that's
just
my-
simply based on
Some of
cost?
these window issues too have been about the need for a custom window, like some of the people wanted to replicate the detail and molding and whatever, and maybe custom period accurate would be a better way to describe high quality.
you can still get a good window and a cheap window that looks like the others, right? The mullion, the requirement for the mullions is we have to have that, and that's actually written in there, right? We gotta make them look like the old windows, but it's the quality of the construction, and how do we make a judgment? How do we make a judgment? We have quotes from some people, but all we know about them is the vendor's name, and unless we have personal experience with that particular vendor, how are we gonna know if it's quality or not?
Well, and honestly, some of the estimates that have come in, it's been difficult to tell whether or not the window that is being installed will actually replicate the historic or the details of the historic window. You can't necessarily make that determination just by looking at the dimensions that are provided in the cost estimate, right?
True,
We've
and
had to
they do
ask
say-
that specifically.
They do have like check boxes for grids to say, but they don't say what the grids look like, right? But they do
Right.
say they're gonna try and mimic them,
Right.
the division of the windows that are there. So my question is, of the grants we're gonna look at today, can we still make a decision to approve or not if we haven't defined what a high-quality window is?
I think there's one reason, or one thing we can, is any mass-produced window that is just off the shelf, so to speak, standard boilerplate window, I think all of these have to have a little bit of customization. So if it's just a window that's in stock, we know that's not going to be very good quality for these buildings. So,
Well, they're all custom-made because of
Well,
size,
yeah,
but they
for
all
size,
use
but-
typical construction methods, right?
And so for me, it's more, in this part, a little bit about design, but a little bit also about, there's better quality vinyl, there's good vinyl, there's cheap vinyl. So what's the difference? And I think these are maybe some of the questions we can ask the applicants today. Some of them have already talked about. I know in the past we've talked to many of these applicants about what they're going to be doing. We've talked about design. We haven't often talked about material, what the material is, what it's going to look like, how great a quality it is. So I think that's an optional question today, is to ask about quality of material in these windows, and if the applicants know what the quality is or not. And so I think that's something to take into consideration today.
And could there be some sort of an inspection by you?
I inspect everything after it's
No,
done.
I know, but I
You
meant
can see the window
before.
ahead of time.
Yeah.
To see how the custom window, see how it is.
I mean,
or
I
what
think
it
that's
looks
part
like.
of what we're asking for is more designed pictures or printouts, drawings of what these windows would look like. Because I can't really inspect them until they're here, and they're not going to make them until they have approval that these are ready to go.
But if these vendors know they can get an order out of it, and be coming from the Historical Review Commission, us not funding, and I'm sure they'd be happy to come down and give us a demonstration of their windows. if we
Right.
wanted to. But that means we can't make a decision today on these windows, because we don't have that information.
I think, again, it just depends on each applicant. If there's questions you have, some of these are really good. There's a lot of information about what the windows are there. Some we have questions on, and I think that's where it weighs. So what does the application have good quality, or how much material, how much information is in each application? So if it's just a list of what the cost is and not more of design or material, then there's more questions to ask. But if these applications have, and some of them are pretty high quality in terms of, design of the windows, material of the windows, and such. I mean, that's up to the commission as a whole, but
I remember seeing some that show you an elevation of the window and it shows the
Right.
divided lights, and some it's just a checklist.
Right.
That lists here's the
Exactly.
size and all that, so.
And I
yeah,
think that's where you determine if you need more information or not.
I'd say, I think as a follow-up to my earlier comment about the quality of windows, most door manufacturers, they have sections of the windows. You could see what the mutton looks like that's applied to the window. Is it applied to the window? Is it between the window panes? What's the section cut of the window? How's the weatherproofing fit in, that type of thing? You know, I think the drawings are available. I think a lot of times maybe, you know, most homeowners are getting elevations, they're getting a list of materials, but they're not, you know, maybe we could just get that information as an additional information to really, you know, refine what we're looking at.
I know when I bought my windows, I actually went to the factory and they literally showed me how they cut them and glue them together, right? The actual
There you go.
details, the way the joint is. But again, do we want to do that to review all these different window manufacturers? But that's really, to your point, how is the window constructed? Let's see the detail of it. Yeah.
But we can, so there are different ways in which we as a commission can approach today's meeting. So we could, if you're completely, if the commission is uncomfortable moving forward, after we review and make decisions on these proposed changes, if we are uncomfortable with the review, we could do a mass tabling of those that are on the agenda, or we can actually go through those that are on the agenda, and if there is missing information, we can be specific with what we would want to see to be able to complete the review of the application, and request those additional documents from the property owner. It would still delay a decision until the next meeting, but we would dictate and or be specific with what we wanted that property owner to provide in order for us to make a decision.
Yes. And if it was me, I would invite the salesman from the window come and give us that presentation. Because there are a lot of details that, and that's what we really want to see, show us how the window's made, right? Me as a homeowner, I learned a lot by talking to a bunch of window vendors.
Sure.
Right? But, yeah.
Well, and if that's what we want to see, I mean, if the determination is everyone that comes before this commission that is proposing a window replacement, we want to actually speak with
One of
the
vendors, right.
manufacturer or the contractor or.
And I think we're talking about 5 suppliers. I think that's all we've seen, right, is 5 of them.
Thereabout, yeah.
Yeah. And I understand some of these people have been waiting since April for a decision on windows, and I hear you about, you know, we could delay it again. I'm sure that's, but they have a year to do it after this, right? If we spend time getting details, they still have a year to get the windows put in and still have the grant.
Well, officially, the funding is committed with a award letter, which is what needs to happen by December 31st of 2024.
Okay.
So an actual award letter needs to be written with the funds committed.
Well, how many of these cases right now are window issues?
More than half.
Yeah.
Well, could we try and do this review of the manufacturers and the installers and to get these people their project done?
When you say do the review,
Well, could we ask them, could we say to them, we have this new, we have a process that requires that we are confident that the window is appropriate and would meet the standards?
so one thing we could do is we could say, hey, there's 5 vendors, have all the 5 vendors at our next meeting, let us talk to it, find out what they know, and tell us about their window, and then we can make the decision if it's a good window, right? That delays it a month, delays the decision a month, but if we really want to know the quality of the window, other than that, the documentation is going to tell us how well the windows meet.
Right,
Right.
I'm in agreement, like, as far as, unless we have specific information in our file, at our fingertips, I think we're probably going to be requesting more information from a number of our applicants. And we'll be delaying it regardless of,
Yeah. So that would be the best way, get them all 5 here, tell us directly about the windows. We'll hear it right from the salesperson. We can make a determination ourselves. Sure.
Sure.
You're the boss.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want us to somewhat go down the path that you were talking about at the study session. And I don't know if I have to state my name or anything regarding the public meeting. But,
I think for the people at home, they'd
oh,
like to
okay.
know.
Well, hi. My name is Jackie Spry. I'm the Director of Planning and Neighborhood Resources for the City of Erie. I think you're talking about a few different things, but couldn't one option be that you put this on hold? You go back and maybe Chris drafts up a set of guidelines for specifically windows, which we saw in one of the case studies that Chris brought to the study session, and then implement that into before you go ahead and vote on anything else, so that you have consistency for the rest of the time that you're voting on these applicants. Only because if you're asking for case-by-case basis, that could get a little messy. You may have to ask for not everybody knows and is an expert on windows, right? So it would just make a lot more sense to me to have a set of requirements already in place before you move forward with voting on anything else.
So in my old job at GE, I had used to buy a lot of things I never bought before, and I would do exactly that. I talked to 3 or 4 vendors, take all their input, and then put together my interpretation of all the good things I want to see in there.
Absolutely.
If Chris did that, we could send it to the 5 window vendors and say, here, do you meet these specs? And then we hear it directly from the manufacturers. Or we just have them come in and say, tell us about your windows.
Or would you require the applicant, which makes a little bit more sense because it puts the responsibility on the applicant who is ultimately getting this money, right?
True, but practically speaking, there's 5 quotes in there from Seaway. Well, they're not going to have 5, I'm not going to have Seaway come back 5 times and they should come once and we would hear all about Seaway windows or Pella windows or whatever the vendor is, right? Because there's a lot of duplication here.
There is some duplication, but I think to her point, it would be easier to have the applicant assist with this because each of these windows are custom to those homes. So, and each window is going to be different. Each window is, some of these applications, the windows are vastly different from the other applicant. And so I don't know that it would be as clear to have the salesperson, the representative come and just talk about their windows when what we need to know is what specifically pertains to the individual applicant.
But Seaway makes one kind of vinyl replacement window. The size difference depending on the application, right? And I would rather hear directly from the vendor who we could ask questions from. If I came and gave you my interpretation of what Seaway said, and you said, well, what about this? I don't know, I got to go back and ask Seaway.
And I think that would still be the same. We would still request that the representative come, but it would be in representation for those applicants.
And I see this a little bit differently. I would think that we would do our due diligence prior to, we don't really need a representative here. We just need to make sure that that vendor tells us and we put it in the guidelines. And then when the application comes in, you already know if they want whatever window, vinyl window from Seaway, I think you said.
And that was one vendor.
That's listed in your guidelines as an appropriate vinyl window that they can then purchase. So you know that even prior to them applying for any kind of grant funding, it's in your guidelines, it's consistent, and you're voting every time based on that guideline.
Are you saying we would give a list of approved
Yes,
vendors?
absolutely. So you can do that. You have the ability to put in your guidelines, a list of vendors, the criteria, any kind of design framework.
But I would want to hear directly from the vendor himself, so I can ask questions when I say, how is the joint welded together? The individual homeowner won't know, but the Seaway rep or whoever vendor it is
And that
would know.
most likely could be done prior, like, again, you could ask those questions to the vendors and put that into your guidelines, because the applicant is the one responsible for going back to the guidelines and saying, okay, I can get X, Y, Z in vinyl windows, and that's it from that supplier. So we've already made the determination of what is acceptable for the grant. And so then it takes out all questions, it remains consistent throughout your process, and becomes fair and equitable. I mean, that's how I see it as a guideline.
And as long as we say or equal, right? Because we can't say
Or
by
equal.
name, these are the only 4 vendors, or equal,
You
right?
cannot,
That if you
right.
can meet these specs and it's somebody that, wants to come up from Pittsburgh and supplies windows, as long as it's
Yeah.
equal, we can't discriminate against other vendors.
No, and I wouldn't suggest putting that into the guidelines, like putting the name of the company, but you can certainly find out specs, and I know Dave can probably speak to this much more than I can, but you can find out the specs of certain windows at different companies.
Every window company has this information.
Yeah,
They don't just make their windows. I mean, they have drawings, they have shop drawings, they have
So-
descriptions, so we could, all the companies that are proposing here could give you
Yeah.
deficit information.
Do you have, like in your business, do you have specs for vinyl windows? Written specs that would talk about
Yeah,
thickness
but
of
they
material?
constantly
and-
change, so we just go online.
Okay.
We don't keep catalogs anymore, it's all online, all the updated information.
Can I read a checklist that I emailed on May 4th of this year to be included with the application for this program? Which I don't think it is. This is the checklist I provided on May 4th. A complete detailed written description of the proposed projects, paint color samples and/or finishing material samples, if appropriate, product specifications and/or renderings, sets of plans, drawings, etc. for the project, current color photographs of the property and the specific issue to be addressed, historic building photographs if applicable, complete project cost estimate from qualified contractor and/or the building supplier, in addition to a detailed work schedule, which includes estimated project completion dates.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very comprehensive, and I don't think anything is wrong with putting things on hold for a few, 2 more weeks or whatever you need to do, or a month, and then revisit those applications. You're going to get this money out the door, and even if I know we've had some internal discussions about that December 31st to 2024 deadline. Even if you have commitment letters sent out already, but the money hasn't been pushed out, you're going to be fine.
That's what we just talked about.
Yes, yeah. So I think a good framework so that you're not coming each time questioning, asking the applicant, and put that on the applicant. That is the responsibility, that checklist or whatever you're going to use, or making sure that they are following the guidelines should be the applicant's responsibility, since they're applying for money for money from this grant. So, thank you.
So again, it is up to us to determine whether or not, right? We're doing
Okay.
how we are proceeding with, first of all, the list that is on the agenda today, but we also need to begin to look at the proposed revisions in the guidelines. Excuse me.
So on the list, there's 5 that are not window related, so we could review those and vote on them, right? The 5 that are not window related.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other ones, the windows, I say we, have the window vendors come, we can, whoever invites them, right? If 5 people have quotes from a vendor and they all call and say, you have to come, well, the vendor only need to come once. Explain to us the windows, and then we can ask them all the questions. Otherwise, it'll be this constant back and forth, what about this, what about that, what about that? It'll just delay it even more.
So, there may be others, I'm just putting this out there. Even though we know that windows specifically are a challenge, there potentially could be others where we, again, have questions about the quality of the materials. There will be others that are very simple, I think, that we can get through today.
Yes.
But yes. So, so let's go back to what's being proposed as far as changes to the guidelines. And then we'll move on to
So do you want
applications
to
themselves.
put do you want to put your proposal from May on this now?
So the checklist that was provided in May was in direct response to the applications that we've been receiving and the lack of material, right? So one of the challenges is, this was again a list that was provided in May, which is, I actually thought the list was going to be on as part of the application anyways, but by the time we get to May, there were people that had already submitted applications, right?
Right.
Using an application that did not have
that in
this
it,
extensive
right.
checklist.
So your specifications and all would be on the actual application?
It would have been part of the application, yes.
Okay, so is it now?
Not currently, not the current application, no.
So
I
we
don't know
need
why
to
it was
change the
never put on there.
application.
I didn't write the application, I didn't create the application, I created the guidelines, but not the application. That was kind of a customized boilerplate from redevelopment.
But I do have the email saying that those changes were going to be implemented,
Yeah.
and I don't think that they were.
So when you say application, we're talking about this thing, not the guidelines.
Correct. We're talking about the application itself. So if you look at the application at the bottom,
Yep.
right, there's a checklist that includes 3 different items, right?
Yep.
So as an applicant, as you're working through the application, you need to check those 3 boxes and provide the attachments that are required. So what was provided in May is a more extensive checklist to be included in the application, so that, again, the applicant, as they are completing the application itself, they have an understanding of our expectations of the type of documents or documentation that is required as part of their application. So, but again, I do have an email response saying that those changes to the application were going to be made.
All right.
But
So-
let's get us back on track.
Well, okay, so in the end, we've got guidelines we're talking about, we've got an application. So we put in the guidelines, your checklist, and say, here's what you gotta provide to us.
Well, and do you
And-
agree with that checklist?
Well, I'd like to hear it again to see if it's, to think about exactly what you're saying. If we include those in the guidelines, then we just tell anybody who's got a window application here, you need to fill this out.
Right, so I think we would need to be specific with,
Right.
if you have a window project.
Right.
We are requiring, because some of these are if applicable, right? If applicable. So
Right.
we would need to be specific. If you are doing a painting project, we want to see your selection of paint color. If you are doing a window replacement, we want to see,
Well, so we were told by that training group, that don't regulate color, right? Don't legislate color.
Yeah, but here's where we get into that problem. So
Yeah.
let's say that someone has chosen to repaint their house, and we don't ask about color, but their choice is aqua. We approve the application. We approve the application for the painting of a home in the color of aqua.
Yeah.
Like, do we want,
Yeah, we're not picking colors, but we have to judge the appropriateness.
We do, yes.
Okay. Well, the ones that they're facing us today, there are no, we've got a brick repair, we've got the one on 8th and Cherry, we've got Ember and Forge, the garage repair, Antonio and Sons, and the one on State Street, 418, 420 State Street, that are not window related.
Right.
So those, we're not looking at any painting projects in there.
The intent of this checklist is to make sure that the applicant is aware of the type of documentation that is needed when submitting their application. And I think because this level of detail has not been in the application, this is why we're seeing inconsistent documentation across our applications, and we consistently have questions. So I guess let me go back to the proposed. Let's go back to the guidelines and the proposes that, or the revisions that have been proposed. We have in red, right, the language around window project materials. So do we feel like this language is sufficient, or do we wish to see additional information provided with regards to window projects specifically? I guess that would be my first question. Is this language sufficient? Do we want to see more?
Well, I don't like the statement, replacement windows need not to be of the exact material, because that's, if we wrote a standard and that says it doesn't have to be exactly what's in the standards, that's what it means, then we need to change this wording.
I'm guessing that was
was in
referring to
reference-
the original, or the
Right,
historic
so if the
material.
original windows-
So if they're wood windows, the
So-
replacement does not need to be wood.
So the
Correct.
replacement window needs not to be of the exact material of the original window.
Right.
We're talking about the red paragraph, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. If the pages were numbered, it'd be page 2.
All right, so then we'll
So
not
are we
approve
slipping
low.
in your language here?
So the commission will
We're not
not
to.
approve low-quality vinyl windows. So that's a big open, what is a
Yeah.
low-quality
Right.
vinyl window?
So defining what low quality is.
Or more precisely, defining acceptable quality, right? If it doesn't meet these standards, if the joints aren't, hot seam welded, and the glass is not, how the glass is attached, and the type of glass, and the argon filling, and the sealing around the edge, and all those kind of million details.
Right.
Yes.
Is there some, you know how meat has like a different grade?
Yes.
Is there some sort of ranking system of windows that we don't know about? Is
Oh,
that
I'm
something
sure there
window
are.
manufacturers know about?
I'm sure
Dave,
there
can
are.
you help with
They-
that question?
There's different ratings, but there's no like set standard. I mean, there's ratings about energy efficiency and some other things, but there's no rating that says this is number 1 window, this is number 2.
Right, okay.
At least I never heard of it, but
But-
there is one.
But like you said, to your point, the thickness of the vinyl and the methods of construction can affect the quality
Yeah.
of the window, how long it's going to last. Yes.
Okay, so we have now, though, kind of come up with some additional suggestions or proposed revisions to the language specific to windows.
If we had a specification of what we wanted to see in windows, this would be the place to put it, right in this paragraph. So that defines the quality of window we expect.
So we would like to see a rendering and or drawing of the replacement window. Is that correct?
And do you want to see materials too?
That's one item, yes. Rendering, we want to know what the lights look like. What else is on your list?
materials?
Um,
No, no.
Finishing material?
So there's a whole bunch of questions around material. What is the vinyl? What is the type of vinyl? What's the thickness of the vinyl? How is it painted? How is it coated? How is it welded? You know, how is the hardware attached? There's a million things that come up with windows. And I think a lot of these people that consider themselves lucky they even got a quote, as busy as the Windows people are, to go into all these details. But those are the things that determine the quality of the windows.
So a rendering or a drawing doesn't need to be computer generated. It could be just simply including with the cost estimate a simple sketch of what, a hand-drawn.
You saw that one estimate from one of the houses on 24th Street, right? That has an elevation of the window, shows you the divided lights and all that stuff. They do that, and I'm sure the window guys, because they're all windows, they do that. But that doesn't tell you about the method of construction. Doesn't tell you about the thickness of the vinyl. Doesn't tell you about all that stuff.
So,
It gives you a picture, yes.
so those are additional specs. So the specs provided for windows need to include the thickness of the vinyl,
That would be one.
okay?
The type of vinyl. I mean, there's a million different PVCs, and right. What is the material?
Instead of writing a complete description of exactly what we would accept, would it not be easier to write? Because if I feel we do that for Windows.
Which is what you suggested originally, Chris,
What's that? Exact,
to say we will not accept this.
yes.
As opposed to
Yeah.
describing what we will
So,
accept.
What I'm thinking now is, and I think, forgive me, Jeff, if I mentioned it or say it wrong, but like, instead of writing an exact detailed description of exactly what we would accept, you know, window, hardware, thickness of vinyl, welding, all of it, construction. If we do that for windows, we're gonna have to do that for siding, we're gonna do that for roofing, we're gonna have to do that for every material, every type of replacement, and that's exhaustive, and we would never get this out. But instead.
But we don't need to do that for anything else, because the windows are the last thing. We don't have
Okay.
any more doors or any more
No,
money to give
but
away.
what I'm saying is with Windows is instead of doing the detail, because I feel if we do it for one, we still have to do it because we're still going to have applications to review, depending on what money's there. If other things we haven't approved or never done, and we have to use that money for something else, then we're going to have these. So instead of a detailed description of window material, why not say specifically in these guidelines, applications, if you're replacing your windows, must include details of what the construction of the construction material, the thickness of the vinyl or other material, the hardware, the welding, that has to be included in the application. Because each one of these is going to be customizable to each individual house. So instead of writing out all the things that we would accept or would not accept, have that included in the application, make that a mandate that all those things have to be discussed in the application, including construction, thickness, hardware, installation process.
So an engineering firm or an architectural firm will write a specification, say this is the minimum acceptable standard. They don't say not this, not that. They don't do it. They don't do the negative, right? They say
set
this is what you
standards.
want.
Usually list a design basis and then optional ones that are
Right.
just as good for that product.
Right.
And then they need to meet that certain standard. Then we also give standards for the energy rating, the type of material, the finish, all those type of things.
Right. So that's what we need, as opposed to you tell us, because then we're back into reviewing every window manufacturer and say, well, it doesn't match this, it doesn't match that, it doesn't match this. You would write a specification, and that would be your standard. Bid to this, I know what I'm getting, and if they take an exception to it, they have to prove to you that the window is as good or better as what you specified, right?
Mhm.
You're proposing that there's a certain spec they need to meet?
Yes. And I would get that spec by talking to the 5 vendors and have them tell us the way they make the window. There may not be that much difference between the manufacturers, but there's probably some.
Yeah. I mean, there's many lists out there of the best residential windows, but I don't think there's no standard. Like I said, there's a standard for energy performance, but I don't think there's any true list of here's the best windows. But there is criteria for trying to rate those windows.
But you know, as well as I do, right, that if I got a window for $500, I got a window for $1,000, there's some difference in how that window is made or it's made of, right? Because why else is there a difference there? So unless we want to get into the thicknesses of this and the weather stripping and the trim and how the joint will go, all that million stuff, we're never going to get to a final answer.
I swear this is the last time I'm interjecting. Dave, since you are an architect, and I'm thinking of best practice here, again, I don't think that it is to the board, it's the board's, the board is not an expert of windows, and they should not be deciding whether or not it meets a certain spec, it has an NG rating. I know that we're not looking at that, but we shouldn't be asking that of you. I know that if I've sat on your board, I would not be able to have drawings in front of me or specs in front of me of a window and be able to determine if it's quality, if it's not quality, if it's midline. So what I'm suggesting again here is that you table these applications, all of them at this moment.
The window ones.
I would table all of them.
Even the ones that are not window?
Yes, I would table everything at this moment, and for consistency's sake, that's why I'm suggesting that. And you come up without question a set of standards that are not as specific as what you're talking about, but a set of standards that the applicant must meet in order to proceed with, not to proceed, so that they understand what is allowable.
Well, what does the national, if you're doing a tax project on a National Register eligible, a National Register property, they have a very specific criteria. Could we borrow that?
It's not
We-
really that specific.
Yeah.
It's not.
I was gonna say, they.
It's not very, and it's up to the, really up to the, I'm trying to think of the word.
The State Bureau, like.
It's up to the tax,
uh-huh.
the tax credit reviewer.
Right, right.
And their interpretation of the guidelines, because the Secretary of Interior guidelines are not specific
Let's
at
go
all.
back to Bill Callahan or Lakota and say, do you guys have a standard? I mean, the easiest way to do this is get the 5 vendors in here and say, here's our window type. We know we're dealing with 5 different vendors. It's not nationwide. Otherwise, we could write a spec that nobody can meet. And I've done that before. Everybody comes back, no, we can't meet that spec.
Well,
So then
that's-
automatically you're wasting time.
Exactly.
You have to
And
ratchet
that's
down the
why,
requirements.
I would suggest putting a set of standards that are attainable and that give you options and that meet the intent of the program, that continue to stay within the intent of the program, but that are set before that application even comes in. I mean, they shouldn't have to, yes, they should provide a checklist, but they should know when they open up the grant application what is expected of them. That provides consistency throughout. The reason that I'm suggesting to table it is I don't think it's necessary to rush with changes on one thing and not look at your whole grant procedures. And it just, for best practice, it just would be a good idea to just hold off and wait to vote on when those are established.
Okay. I will volunteer to put together a standard like that on windows, but I think we should vote on the 5 that are not window related. People want to do brick repair before winter comes. You know, pretty soon we're going to be out of nice weather.
What is the general consensus? So, Jeff, you'd like to go forward.
To define a standard or a standard quality window, which I will
Okay.
get by talking to all the window vendors.
So, and that's.
I don't mind having a special meeting and hearing from these vendors.
Well, if
we
everybody,
do that?
I'm sure they'd be happy to come and talk to us.
So, okay, we're still looking at number 4, which is broadly the proposed revisions to the guidelines. So if I put this in terms of how we want to move forward, or at least how it's being proposed, We will need, Jeff, specifically what you're suggesting is that there would be additional material for this proposed revised section on page 2. So
Yes.
that what is provided is not sufficient, that there would need to be additional revisions.
Correct.
Okay. So, Craig, where are you at with regards to specifically the proposed revisions on page 2 around windows? Are you in agreement with Jeff? Are you?
Well, I think that whether you say what you won't accept or specify what you will accept, maybe it is, I think, easier to say what you won't accept. You don't think so, Jim?
You don't specify the negative. It can't be this, it can't be this. You say, here's what I want. If you don't meet
Okay.
this,
Well,
I don't
I've
want
never,
it.
I've never done a window spec
Dave,
before. I'm sorry.
back me up on that. You don't write, I think you don't write a specification that says it can't be this, it can't be that. You want, this is what it is.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Please.
Hi. Hi, guys. It's Erin Kerner on West 24th Street. It's good to see everyone again. I just wanted to understand, so basically what you guys are saying is you guys will kind of institute requirements of like a certain level of window. I'm hearing that correctly?
Correct.
Like a minimum requirement of what will be accepted?
Yes. That's correct, based on the 5 vendors that we have seen frequently giving quotes.
Okay, and forgive me because I went down a really, really long rabbit hole this weekend of reading all of the final rules around the ARP and, what this money is used for. And when you guys go to think about this, there was one point that I thought may come into play, and it was when you guys are creating these programs to be equitable, is there one specific question that they mentioned in the compliance and guidance in the reporting section is like, are there administrative requirements that result in disparities in ability to complete applications or meet eligibility requirements? So I just want to make sure when you guys are thinking about instituting, the policies for a certain level of window, that wouldn't negatively impact certain groups from even being eligible for the funds. Because if it's a certain level of window, then they may not be able to afford that, and thus they can't even participate in the program.
So it does, though, the ARP funding, though, it does allow us to set criteria. So,
Yes, I completely understand that, but I just don't think that they intend the criteria to then, discriminate against certain groups because they don't have enough funds.
We also have in our, I believe it's our ordinance, an economic hardship clause when it comes to other activities in historic, while we don't have any historic districts yet, or
Right.
not big districts, we do have an economic hardship clause, and she's correct that some of these specs may, if they're too great, may prevent some applicants from applying because they don't have the funding available.
But we're paying the bulk of this. We're paying more than 90% of all these things anyhow, right?
Right.
At the 15th, what the biggest obstacle, I think, to people is who can't get the money up front because it's a reimbursement grant. The people who can't afford to get the money up front are the ones that can't take advantage of the program just because they're economically disadvantaged. But that doesn't affect. We're paying most of the cost of these window projects with grant money.
So at this point, so quite frankly, where I'm at, and I know this doesn't help any of our applicants, where their applications have been tabled and/or they have been waiting since spring or midsummer for decisions. I feel strongly that we probably need another work session. Not where, again, we can't vote on anything in a work session, we can't formally institute policies in a work session, but we can have conversations in a work session and bat around ideas. And Jeff, admittedly, you were not at the last work session.
Correct.
And so I think clearly having a work session that includes as many commissioners as possible might be productive for us. So I don't, as much as it pains me to say this, I actually do agree, based on the discussions we're having here today, that we do need to table our slate of applications for yet another work session where all commissioners are present, so that we can have more open dialogue about some of these ideas.
I agree with everything you said, except we just table the window ones and vote on the other 5.
I didn't make a motion, so we have no motion on the table. So I don't think that we should, I mean, we would still need to go application by application. So that's where Jeff is at, right?
Right. So I make a
being able to-
motion that we will review all of the applications that are on the agenda and vote on those that do not involve windows. Those would get tabled. And if you're saying a group work session, if you pick a date, I'll make sure we get the vendors here. They can talk to us and give us firsthand give us their spiel on their windows.
I still don't even know that, well, in any case. That's,
I mean, I think it's good to create a work session. I can't speak to what you guys vote on, what you don't vote on. In terms of a work session, I think it's good. I do still worry that if we're focusing on windows, it's gonna come up that we're gonna have to focus on roof material, we're gonna have to focus on siding material.
I agree with you,
We don't
Chris.
And then
have
that's what
we don't have
Jack-
more money to give away.
I agree.
That's it,
I
we're done.
understand,
We're
but
done.
no, we're not, because if some of these applications that we've approved don't come through, then we have more money than to approve. And if somebody then wants to come along, we have some siding here too. So then we have to talk about what is acceptable for exterior cladding. You know, are we going to
Right.
set different? So that's my concern, and I think that was what Jackie was trying to speak to. That if we solely focus on windows and we don't look at other things, one, if I just focus on windows here, I'm gonna have to provide specs for everything else. I think that's just across the board. And then the other issue is that all of these questions would be answered if we had design guidelines in place, which we don't.
Right.
Nor can I, in 1 month, write design guidelines for this specific city.
Correct.
So,
But we can't say, we won't approve low quality if we don't define what low
yes, I
quality
agree.
is.
I agree.
Right? How
I
can you
agree.
say-
We need to define that a little better. But my concern is that that it could bleed over into other materials and other types of projects as well. I mean, if we talk about masonry, we haven't talked in terms about what type of mason
Mortar.
the mortar. We haven't talked about specific mortar.
But actually, a
specifications.
lot of the quotes do call out the type of mortar, because I know there's different kinds and expansion and contraction, all
is this-
those guys have called that out.
Anybody who's already been approved is,
They're beyond this.
okay.
They're
so-
approved.
So this is just for not approved ones yet.
The ones that we have not yet approved on.
Okay.
Yes.
And we do have a motion on the table. So Jeff's motion is to table all of the applications that pertain to windows, but then review all those that do not, or pertain to windows.
Correct.
So is there a second for that? Is there a second for that? Okay,
And that going-
so hearing no second, would someone like to propose an alternate motion?
Well, how quickly could we have a work session?
It would take at least probably 2 weeks to get it together. I mean, 2 weeks, the date would have to be at least 2 weeks out. I don't think we can put together anything this week, maybe late next week. It just depends on what's available to us, what room is available, what technology is available, etc.
But we ultimately need, again, need to have, because we don't want to unreasonably and/or without cause just continue to kick the can down the road, right? We want to have purposeful discussions, make decisions, and then relay that information to those who have applied. So,
Well, I think, and the redevelopment authority was anxious for that to happen with us, correct?
the redevelopment authority was also anxious for us to pause, to review and revise the guidelines based on experiences learned
Right.
through implementation. So the redevelopment authority was also in favor of hitting the pause button until we can
Right,
do the work that needs to be done.
right.
So do we have, is there an alternate, is there a revised motion on the table? Does anyone want to make a revised motion regarding the slate of applications on the agenda for today?
Well, I'm not necessarily making this, I'm just.
We can have discussion, it's okay.
Have
A
discussion.
motion, an alternative motion.
Could
yeah.
we propose that we have a work session as quickly as possible, and at that work session, narrow down the specifications for windows, siding, and roofing? Was that the other thing?
I mean, I don't know that we can cover all of that in one work session, and that's my issue, is that if we focus on windows, I think we're gonna have to think of specs for other materials as well. And that's easier when we're talking about a new grant opportunity down the road where we create something more permanent. Here, the windows are the issue, but it is a concern of mine that we would have to talk about other projects as well, and we're not gonna be able to cover that in 2 hours. So, that would be multiple work sessions, and I don't know that it would be feasible to kick the can down the road that long. So, those are my concerns.
Well,
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So here's my question, though, is that we keep talking future tense. You guys published a document, you guys put it on the internet, you put your seal on it, we signed it, we've been following through with everything, and now you're trying to change the contract. So this is where I feel that what you guys want to do is for the common good, and that you want to write better policies and stuff, but this has been kicked down for almost 4 months. And that if we met the criteria of the documentation that was given to us, I don't see why you can't vote on this to be approved or not. And that's just my opinion.
and who is that speaking?
Brad Ford.
I'm sorry, my name is Brad Ford. I also live across from Washington Park.
Thank you.
Dave, do you have an opinion?
I mean, I agree with, there's a lot of different opinions out there, and we're trying to settle on what's the best fair thing, given the information has been discussed, the information has been published. And I'm still just trying to think about the best decision moving forward right now. There's a lot of great discussion about windows, minimum quality, all those type of things. But then again, Brad, of course, good point. We have a certain application that was submitted based on certain rules. I'm still kind of pondering what exactly.
Is
the
Mr.
best
Ford
way
one
to
of
move forward.
the ones that's in the 5?
It would be, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what are the 5 that we are?
Hi.
What are the 5 that we are?
So the one is Jeff Kidder for
Uh-huh.
the
Right,
property on 8th and Cherry.
right,
There's Ember and Forge.
right.
There's Antonio and Sons, which is rebuilding of outbuilding on their property on State Street. There's the storefront at 418, 420 State Street. And there's brick repair on 2650 Poplar. The rest are windows. And Mark Adams, I guess he's not doing windows, he's doing siding and a porch.
Well, I see Thayer
Yeah, and
Thompson,
the
Shanley Corner,
Excuse me, hi.
Antonio.
I also am one of the people with vinyl, hi. I also have a vinyl window application in, and I'm following this quite closely as well. And you know, I followed all of the guidelines and submitted an application months ago, and I just am worried about the committee handing out grant money to other projects, and then all of these other projects that continue to be tabled, what happens when all the money is gone, and we have submitted everything in the same way that all of these other projects have. It just doesn't seem fair to change the rules partway through for some of the applications, but not all of the applications.
We're not accepting any
We appreciate
new
your
grant
feedback.
applications, right?
Yeah, right now, all new applications are on hold. So the applications, if we were to table part or all today, those that we've received that are on this agenda today, if we tabled all or part, those that are tabled would come before any new applications. Right now, I'm not accepting any new applications. They're setting in a pile on hold, so they would not come before what we've already slated on the agenda, whether they're tabled or whether they're not.
You're still eligible.
They would still be eligible, yes.
Is there any way to grandfather in those of us that have submitted our applications per the old requirements as a sign of good faith that we've been kind of sticking this out for months and months, and then moving forward, all new applications subject to the revised rules? Could be a clean way of doing it.
So at this point, it wouldn't make any difference, because quite frankly, we have more applications than what we have funding for. So the question really we will never see new applications at this point, because even if there are select applications that are not approved for funding from the stack that has already been received, we have others that have already been received to fill their place. So we have no need to solicit new proposals. So the guidelines need to be what they need to be. And so all of the points that are being made are certainly valid from those applicants that are represented on this Zoom call, whether it be, stressing that you applied with the guidelines that were in place, right, at the time of the application, at the time you drew it down or downloaded it from the Redevelopment Authority's website, to, you've had applications perhaps tabled multiple times, right? All of your comments, I think, are valid. And we appreciate you all speaking up regarding your opinions. So at this point, I'm trying to decide whether to just propose something myself, a motion, and
See if we get a second.
and see if I get a second.
Just another discussion piece. In our application, we do say the improvements should comply with the Secretary of Interior standards.
We do.
We know that is not an exact science.
Right.
But there is a description, and some of that is interpretive by whoever is reviewing.
It is.
So, yeah, I don't really consider what we're doing changing the rules. I think we're just trying to get that standard so that we're treating everybody as fair as possible. Because it isn't like you look in the standard and says, use window A for this type of building. It's really just what's appropriate as far as material, what's compatible, what's architecturally similar. So there's a lot of questions out there. So I think what we're doing is we're kind of taking a pause and a breather and saying, how should we do this fairly? Because we want to distribute this money, but we want to do it to match historical character, which some people are doing a great job of doing.
Right.
And we're just trying to judge the applications appropriately together. I don't know if that's giving you any answers. I'm just saying that in the application, it does say that as further backup for what we're trying to do here, is really refine that further, so someone that picks it up could say, okay, I could do that, or this is what I need to submit. And that's what we're talking about, is what they submit to meet this, what we show in here, and then how do we kind of say yes or no? And we're just trying to treat everybody fairly is really the end results, and also making sure it's appropriate.
Right. So I can't help but keep going back to the fact that we're still hashing this out, and that tells me that we, at a minimum, need another work session before we are able to make decisions. Now, whether we could come out of that work session and have no additional requirements for applicants, we could come out of that work session and have maybe some additional information that would need to be provided from applicants. We could have come from that work session a different set of instructions that we as reviewers are to follow when we review applications. So at the minimum, though, it does sound like
What if we had a work session and also at the same time scheduled another special meeting? That, so that if we do have the good fortune of having a productive work session and we create these standards, then we'd have a meeting already on the docket, on the, happening, so that this would happen more quickly.
So we can do that. The challenge is having a work session where we don't know what the outcome of our work session is.
Well, that's
And because if we schedule,
the only risk to that is that we have to cancel the special meeting that we've already scheduled.
but the special meeting would need to be publicly.
Right, but meetings can be canceled. So if we don't come up with a consensus in our heads at a work session, then we could wait and have another, wait till our next meeting.
I'd like to just jump in real quick here, because I think there is, as one of our viewers mentioned, there is a lot of talk of the future. These applicants did apply under the current set of guidelines, and there have been questions and things, and I think the questions are fair and honest. I think what could be done, I'm not a commissioner, I don't have a power to vote. But I don't know that it's fair to split up the applications, and I just don't know that it's fair. What we could do, or what I would maybe propose if I were a voting member, and I don't know if that's allowed or not, but I would table them. I would have a special meeting around Windows. I don't know that we can create specific specs just for Windows and not do that for others. And we could certainly do that when we create a new grant program. But at issue right now is Windows. So create the special work session where I reach out to the representatives from these Windows companies, invite them to come talk about their Windows, and we can even ask questions about specific applications. What is this? What is the material? How is it constructed? Every question you want to ask about the window, about that pertain to these applications and applications to come. Because you're right, if we approve all of these, we're out of money. We don't have any more money to spend. So there's no reason then to create a bunch of specs that we're not going to use in this grant program. So we
Well, my
invite,
wish is that we
one second.
raise money and that we continue to have this commission.
Right, that's a different question though. But right now for this, we're focused on these windows and these applications, and I want to get this money out. I'd like to see this money get out so we don't keep tabling. But there are still questions and valid questions. So have the special work session, let's say in 2 weeks, if whatever I can get it scheduled for, there's an open date. Get it scheduled, have it there, invite the representatives of these, and we can even invite the applicants. And ask questions about these specific projects that would satisfy our questions, would satisfy our issues, and then at the next meeting, we would be ready to vote. We would have no more questions about the windows. We schedule 2 hours. We can talk for 2 hours about windows. We can ask and do a Spanish Inquisition of the window representatives to get all the questions we have about these specific projects, so that these applicants, which are good projects, there are good things and worthy of this project or this program, so that they no longer have to wait. And it's specifically, this meeting would be specifically tailored not towards creating guidelines for a program that will not be used because they're out of money, but that would be able to get these applicants through the process and would answer all of our questions without having a bunch of back and forth about creating a bunch of guidelines that we won't use for this. In the future, yes. And we can certainly then have that conversation about a future program and how to, guidelines and all that. But I think for this case, it might make it easier to just schedule this meeting and focus on the applications we have and the questions we have about the current slate of projects.
Well, I thought we were gonna create standards about windows. I thought that was the whole purpose.
I think, but my question is if we do that, we'll have to do that for vinyl or siding, we'll have to do that for roofing, we'll have to do that for masonry, we'd have to do that for painting, we would have to do that for any other project. I don't think it's fair to just focus on one and create really stringent guidelines on that and not look at the others.
And that's not where we're at.
Right.
I mean, quite frankly, that's not where we're at.
No.
So, one of the reasons, right, we're soliciting funding to develop design guidelines is to help address those questions. Right. And the design guidelines will provide specific guidance for windows, right, doors, porches, and roofs, right, siding,
good
et cetera.
Design guidelines would take, what, a year at least to create?
It's going to take time. So,
yeah.
One of the reasons that we were intentional, at least I felt we were intentional up front in launching this program without design guidelines, is that we wanted to get this funding out on the street.
Right, exactly.
So our good intentions have created some challenges, right? Because we do not have the design guidelines in place because we chose to get this funding and this program up and running so that the money could be on the street and used before the American Rescue Plan Act funding sunsets. But we did create some problems for ourselves. So, yes, whomever is speaking.
Yes, this is Mark Adams. For the last 6 months, I've been on these meetings, and it seems like you keep giving me requirements and requirements and requirements, and I'm giving you the requirements. I'm getting an understanding of what it is you want. Now, if you have this new meeting, can you come back and actually say, hey, Mark, you're not going to get funding because we've changed these requirements to the point where we don't feel you can satisfy them? I mean, that's my concern.
No. So,
well, if that's the case, why don't you vote on it right now? On the ones that are tabled, you should vote on them because these are people that are in the same shoes that I'm in, that have been waiting and giving you the information that you want. I'll be happy to give you whatever you need, but I really think you need to vote on this.
So again, we appreciate your feedback. As an applicant who has been working with the city and the redevelopment authority to submit all of the required paperwork. So thank you. Thank you for your feedback. So
I'm sorry, excuse me.
where I was at, Chris, was about to propose a motion. So again, because I feel like there is a lot of discussion happening, I feel like we do need a work study session to hash out some of these details. perhaps not to, no, I don't want to go down that route. I was going to say perhaps not necessarily to change the guidelines and/or make them more stringent for those who have already submitted applications, but for at least the commissioners to kind of have further discussion about the review of the applications that have been submitted, whether that be addressing questions pertaining to the windows or anything else, because I happen to agree with you that if we create specific, like spec requirements for windows, we're going to have to do that for all of them, yes. So where I was going with that was actually proposing a motion to schedule within 2 weeks a work session for the commission with the intent to vote on the slate of applications at the November meeting.
Wait, say that again?
To study a work session within the next 2 weeks, and with the intent to go through this list of applications and vote on funding decisions at the November meeting.
The work session is to educate ourselves on windows in order to vote on that?
If that's what the primary question is.
Okay. No, I agree with that. I just want to
I mean,
clarify
I also
that.
have questions about
We're
siding.
we're not going to vote.
But-
We're not going to vote at the special session.
No, you
We
can't.
cannot vote at the work session.
And if we have the vendors come in and explain to us about windows, I wouldn't make the decision that day about their windows or not. I'd want time to think about it, right? So if the work session is to prepare ourselves to understand windows better, then vote at our next regular meeting.
We cannot vote
Okay.
nor make formal decisions at the work
Can
session,
be discussions.
because it needs to be, anything that we do that is a formal business or activity of the commission needs to be done in a public forum.
Okay.
So we can have a work session, a study session, without doing formal commission business, without having it be public, but all votes, all voting needs to be done in a public forum, in a public meeting.
So we would be setting up to have a discussion primarily about windows, but if there are questions about other things, we could certainly talk about that as well. But it seems the big issue is windows, and we could talk about that. We could have, I will email, it would be better, I think, coming with my official City of Erie signature, inviting them to come. So I'll reach out to them, I'll invite them to come, and hopefully they will all come. And we can ask as many questions as we want. We can talk about what we can't make any decisions, but we can certainly talk about issues. And then at the next meeting, I think it would be a vote, certainly be a vote for these projects. And no other, for those who are viewing, there'd be no other applications in front of these. These would be the same agenda that we see here, would be on the next meeting. No other applications would be reviewed.
Okay, I'm good with all that. What about the 5 that are not window related? We're going to table them as well?
There are only 5 that are not window related on this list.
Right.
I was tabling everything
I think
until
it would-
November.
I think it would be,
That's part of my motion, anyways.
I think it would be better to table them all.
Okay.
I don't like tabling any of them, but if there's questions, then we need to table them.
I was
until
with you
we
right
answer.
up to not tabling, or the tabling all of them, not the 5. So
Okay.
I was with you there.
I have a quick question if I could.
Is there a second on the motion?
This is the motion to, the second motion, the table.
This is the motion to schedule a public meeting, or to schedule a work session within 2 weeks. And to table everything currently on the agenda, or all of the applications on the agenda, with the intent to vote on them at the November meeting.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion has been seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I just have a quick question, if I could. In the spirit of fairness, well, is it public record, like all of the window applications that were submitted prior to this under the same guidelines that have already been approved, are we able to see those and see what has been approved versus how the guidelines are going to be changed? Just wondering if it's fair that, you know, other projects got approved under the same guidelines that we applied and our requirements could be different.
So anything that has been funded is of public record. So the way to access that information, I'm not sure if Chris would just provide it, but the way to access that information through a process would be right to know. But again, I don't think that we are talking about revising.
I thought we said that earlier. We're not revising.
Our guidelines.
Anybody who's been approved is not, this discussion doesn't
No,
involve them.
what, Aaron, right? Aaron? Yeah. What Aaron is asking about are the ones that have been approved. Because if I'm understanding correctly, she probably would want to see what has been approved to be able to compare her project to what has been approved. Am I getting that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So I just want to make sure if like my project is apples to apples as somebody else's and they got approved.
Wasn't hers
and this is
already
whatever
approved?
I done, that wouldn't seem fair if our projects
No.
are the same.
This is her
both
second,
projects
this
are
is
the
her
same
second
guidelines.
request.
Yes.
Yeah, Aaron, I
We did
completely
rules
agree with you
before.
on
Okay,
that one. I mean,
her
going
first one
forward,
was
you guys
approved.
can put all the rules you want, but for those of us that have been waiting, I think you should not table us, vote on all of them, including the windows, and then going forward, put whatever conditions you want on the people that are sitting there not waiting for reapproval.
So again, where we're, so we have, so again, appreciate those that are participating, appreciate hearing from you. So where we're at, we had a motion, we had a second. In calling for further discussion, we had a couple of additional public comments come in. So is there any further discussion among the commissioners regarding the motion?
I'm just confused on one issue. I thought that Aaron's both of hers had been approved.
No,
No.
she's been
Okay.
tabled since August.
Her first
Okay,
application
her first one was approved,
Mhm.
but the second one is in this group.
Correct.
Correct. It was
Okay,
tabled at the
all right,
August
all right,
meeting.
all right.
Okay, so if we have no further discussion, we've got a motion on the table, we've got a second. All in favor of the motion, please signify by aye.
Restate the motion for us clearly.
So the motion is to schedule a work session within the next 2 weeks for the commission. And I'm not going to run through the agenda for that. I'm going to keep this motion simple.
Yeah.
So our motion is to schedule a work session within the next 2 weeks and table the current applicants on the agenda for the September meeting, or October meeting, October meeting, with the intent to have them reappear on the November agenda for vote.
Okay.
So we have, again, motion on the table, seconded. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Yeah, hi.
Aye, okay. Opposed?
Opposed
Okay,
to tabling.
okay. So the motion passes 3-1. So Chris, please, within the next 2 weeks.
Yep. we'll get
Thank
that
you.
scheduled.
I'd say earlier the better.
Well, if we need to get a second, if we don't finish everything at the first work study session, if we happen to schedule a second one in October.
So, yeah, maybe try and schedule 2 meetings.
Okay. Do we want to have any further discussion about any of the proposed revisions in the guidelines, or do we what I might recommend is that we hold that conversation for our work session as well, and revisit for the November meeting if we want to make any changes to the guidelines, because at that point, or at this point, we don't have new applications that we are soliciting. It is a closed program because we have more than what we can fund.
Right. I mean, I'm still receiving applications. I'm still receiving phone calls and emails about applications, but I've been honest with everyone who has called and emailed that right now it's on hold. We don't really have the funding. We're under kind of a current review to see where funding is, but yeah, we have way more applications than we have funding at the moment.
Okay. So is there anything else for today's, that is the end of our agenda? Is there anything else for discussion today? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Fantastic. Thank you. Applicants, we may not have voted in a way that makes things that you approve of. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We may not have made decisions in a way that you approve of, but we really do appreciate your feedback. And we are committed now to making decisions at the November meeting without question. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have a quick question if somebody can answer it for me. So I was part of that other 5 for brick repointing, and with pushing it back to November, how long would the approval process, I mean, if it was approved, how long would the approval process be in order to get that money and then begin the repairs?
I think it's been about, once we approve, it's been about 2 weeks out from the time that Redevelopment Authority gets the approval letter packet. Then they create a grant agreement. It's been about 2 weeks from the time we submit our end to the time that they contact you to schedule a time to come in and sign the grant agreement.
Okay, and then is there a time frame in order to fulfill that grant agreement? Because with winter.
Yes, it has. The timeline is. I mean, we would be checking in with you, but you have until, I believe it's the end of 2026 we have until 2026 to have to spend that money.
Right.
I think the
We
redevelopment.
put a year.
Yeah, I think redevelopment has said within a year of grant agreement signing.
Okay.
So you would
Thank
have to, you would have until November of 2024 to get the work done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.